All right, the big story that we're tracking at this point, massive blow to Tarun Tejpal as law finally catches up with him. Tarun Tejpal charged with rape, charges framed by the court. He pleads not guilty in the rape case. Those are the latest details that are coming in that we're tracking. Let's go across to Herman, who is live at this point. Herman, all right, before going to Herman, let's listen in to what the lawyer had to say.
No. In fact, the matter here now has been posted on the 21st. Yeah. Just to report on the status of what happened in the High Court on the 1st. Because as you know, the petition in the High Court is scheduled for hearing on the 1st.
Sam, can you also just shortly walk us through the sections here?
Pardon?
So can you...
Like I said, 341, 342, then 354A, 354B,
376,
376, subsection 2, F and K.
Okay.
All that. And he is pleaded not guilty.
All right, joining me is Senior Advocate Ariman Sundaram on the phone line. Thank you very much, Mr. Sundaram, for joining in. Your first response, it's been 4 years and now finally the charges are being framed, although it's still some time before the trial will actually begin.
Well, yes, this is really the first step that charges have now been framed. There's much which will follow because there's much gap between framing of charges and the finding of somebody guilty. So I suppose now it is a question of the prosecution having to prove the charges. And there is going to be a long protracted trial because there's a strong defense which is sought to be brought up from what I've seen earlier of a consensual act. And therefore it is a matter of evidence and trial and proof of through other witnesses, through other sources, through the CCTV camera, with all these other issues will all come up now. So yes, this is the first step, framing of charges. One has to now see where that's going to head to in the actual trial.
Right, and your response to the fact that it's taken 4 long years for this to actually come to the framing of charges itself?
Look, this was a case which from the very beginning had a lot of for and against arguments. While there was a public sentiment which seemed to point towards the immediate charging and trial of the person concerned, there was another view which had also come up that perhaps this was not really as simple as that. Maybe there was something to the defense. So it did require a prolonged investigation. Together with this was also the fact that where some material which was asked for by the accused was not actually being furnished, and therefore they had to move for various petitions for that purpose. So all in all, this trial has dragged on. I mean, the investigation has dragged on in this matter. And I don't think such a dragged out investigation in a case like this speaks very strongly for a prosecution, because I would imagine if it's a very strong prosecution case, the investigation should have been completed much quicker. Charges should have been framed much earlier. So I suppose, like I said, it's too early to tell now. One will have to see what the trial unfolds.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sundaram, for joining us with your views on this. Let's also now go across to Herman, who's joining me at this point. Herman, take us through the details of this entire thing.
They are same thing, repetition actually.
Yeah, it'll be. Well, first of all, I have noted lawyer here, Mr. Rajiv Gomes, here with me. So could you tell us exactly what transpired today in court? And as far as the defense is concerned, do you see this as a setback coming there?
This is not a setback. What has happened today was just a procedural act. The charges were ordered to be framed on the last date of hearing. Today what happened was the charges which were framed on the last date of hearing was just explained to the accused. And he was asked whether he was pleading guilty or not to the charges, to which he has pleaded not guilty. Now the trial in this case has been stayed by the Honorable High Court. The High Court has said that no witnesses should be examined till the petition is disposed by the High Court. We have filed a petition against that order, framing charge. And therefore the next date of hearing now is deferred for only to know the status of the petition before the High Court.
In case if a discharge is granted there, we are talking on the much earlier before the status report is to be submitted, what happens next, sir?
If Tarun is discharged by the High Court, then there won't be any further proceedings before the trial court.
And in case if that does not happen, then what is your next legal remedy that you have?
If we don't succeed in the High Court, then we will appeal to the Supreme Court.
Yeah. So you have your counsel who's also your client who's been rather saying that, he's been crying a vendetta in a certain way. Is that in any which way is going to influence the trial here? Do we see that?
political vendetta is one of our arguments before the trial court and even before the High Court. Political vendetta is one of them. The other thing is that the case of the prosecutrix is inherently improbable. The manner in which she says, and there are so many statements on record, the CCTV on record, which contradicts her version, whatever her version is before the investigating officer, has been contradicted by all those things. There is no, besides her statement, there is no other circumstantial or direct evidence which points to the guilt of this.
Sir, are you confident enough of getting a discharge? On what basis are you
confident? As I've said, that there is the case yes, is because the defects, the lacuna in the prosecution case, the inherent improbability of the prosecutrix statement. Relying on all these defects, we can make a statement that we are confident. And eventually, it is the court which will decide.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you very much. Well, that was noted lawyer Rajiv Gomes, who is appearing for Tarun Tejpal, in fact, saying that they're hopeful that the next stage here now happens is that they're hopeful that they get a discharge. In case if that happens, the trial shuts. But for now, charges have been framed. Also, at the same time, you have the additional sessions court, which has asked for a status report to be filed on the basis of the petition that has been filed, in fact, at the Bombay High Court. Remember, 2 days earlier, you had the lawyers of Tarun Tejpal approaching the Bombay High Court, the Goa bench, and asking for a stay. But nonetheless, what did the court then do? They said that nothing doing. You go back to the additional sessions court, which is here. Here is where the charges were today framed. But at the same time, also maintaining that the next date of the trial will be announced only by the Bombay High Court order, because the petition still continues to be there.
All right, stay with us. I'm going to go across to Shamina Shafiq, who's joining me on the phone line. Thank you very much, ma'am, for joining in. Your first response to the fact that we've seen the charges finally being framed after 4 long years.
Yeah, indeed, really very long, and it in fact kills the very spirit of justice, because if a survivor of any kind of sexual assault has to wait for almost 4 years to get the charges framed, then you can think of the kind of situation, especially the mental situation that a woman or a girl goes through. And incidentally, in fact, I was the member of the NCW when this case happened, and incidentally also in charge of Goa. I have been speaking to the survivor then, and I know what kind of trauma she was going, the emotional trauma as well. And now 4 years is a very long wait. And as I was hearing the honorable lawyer of Mr. Tarun Tejpal, obviously when they see themselves in a better position, because 4 years is definitely a very long time. So I'm not really very happy with what has happened over a period of time.
Right, ma'am. Also, the fact that we were speaking to Mr. Sundaram, senior advocate, just a while back, who also said that the fact that the case is extremely dragged out for so many years doesn't really speak of a strong prosecution as well.
This is what my point is, that, see, there were certain flaws which were very well pointed out even by the National Commission then, and also it was very evident for what happened, the series of events that happened at that point of time. I don't know why it took so long for the authorities to actually frame the charges. I mean, obviously, so there's quite an excuse for the other party to make that there was something not very strong, and that is why it took so long. So it is definitely, I hope it doesn't go against the complainant, but it is not in the spirit of justice. This is not what is expected in India when it comes to providing justice to women, at least, and especially in the cases of sexual assault and rape.
Right. And of course, the defense is prepared, obviously, to go all the way to the Supreme Court if necessary.
Yeah, and sexual harassment at workplace is an act, as it is itself a very difficult situation, and any woman who's working within a premises, an office, and she complaining about a boss regarding any kind of sexual offences, as it is very difficult. And if such tardy judicial system is actually followed by, then I think it also kills the very energy and the spirit with which the woman herself and also the people who are supporting her. I mean, the case should have not dragged so long. That's absolutely true.
All right. Thank you very much, Shamina Shafiq, for joining us with your views on that.